Okay. Um, so welcome everyone. How are you all today? You can let me know in the chat if you want to. Welcome to the Dungeons and Dragons and Beyond, How to Run a Library RPG Program webinar. My name is Beth Yates, and I'm the Children's Consultant from the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. And our presenters today are going to be Kirsten Weaver, Chris Brozo, and Austin Sr., who are all from the Indianapolis Public Library. And I'll let them introduce themselves in a little more detail when we get started here in just a minute. But for now, I have a few housekeeping items for you. So first of all, we are going to ask that you stay muted during most of this presentation, though at the end, during the official question section, we'll invite you to unmute at that point. If you're not sure how to make sure that you're muted, you can do it by going to the top right-hand corner of your picture. If you hover there with your mouse, there should be an option to mute or unmute. So obviously if it says mute, that means you're unmuted. Also, I mentioned this before, but we ask that you please change your name to your actual name on your picture. Again, top right corner of your picture. When you hover your mouse there are also 3 little dots. You click on those dots and rename is one of the options for you. Back to questions and how we'll handle them. If you have a question during the webinar today, we invite you to type it in the chat box. It looks like most of you have found the chat box. But if you don't see the chat, when you hover your mouse near the bottom of your screen, a bar menu should appear across the bottom and the chat icon should be there. And when you click on it, it should open a chat box for you. I will be watching the chat and we'll get your questions to the presenters as soon as there's a good opportunity if they don't get to them first. And like I said, there should be time at the end for questions as well. And just a heads up, as we go back and forth with sharing the different presenter screens, you might seem to lose the chat. But again, if you just go to the bottom, you should be able to reopen it. Heads up that this webinar is being recorded. So after the webinar has been transcribed by me, it will be available on the Indiana State Library's archived training page. And I will also send the link out to everyone who registered. So if you're watching this live right now, you'll receive that along with a resource handout that the presenters are going to share with you later. So just be aware that that email is coming, but it might take a week or two to get it. So don't panic. This session today is worth 1 TLEU, or Technology Library Education Unit, yay, TLEU, for library staff in Indiana. So if you're watching live today, again, your certificate should be available for download at the end of the webinar. I'll be putting it in the chat for you. If you are watching a recorded version of this webinar in the future, you will need to have someone in HR or administration at your library create a certificate for you, as they're the ones who can verify that you watched this recording. One more note, for weekly updates on upcoming trainings and to learn more about what's happening in libraries across the state, please subscribe to the Indiana State Library's e-newsletter. It's called The Wednesday Word. And check our continuing education website for other professional development opportunities. And I'm going to drop the link to sign up for the Wednesday Word in the chat if you are interested in doing that. And that's it. I think that we are just doing some technology here. I think we're ready to get started. So I'm happy to turn the presentation now over to Kirsten, Chris, and Austin. You guys take it away.
Okay, welcome everybody. I'm so glad you joined us today. We're going to try and fit a lot of information into a little bit of time. So we're not going to go over the why you should play RPGs and D&D in your library, but we are going to go over what you need to do it. And what we use and how we do it at our library. So I get to talk to you about what you need, which is primarily for the in-person type things. Austin is going to talk to you about what kind of resources and online websites and things we use for the virtual program that we're running right now. And then Chris is going to talk about how we actually run our program and what we use most as far as like the mechanics of how we do it. And all of the things that we're going to talk about will apply to pretty much any RPG you play. Just some of the websites, as far as like the official websites, may be a little different. So let's get started, and I will share my screen with you. Okay, so Dungeons and Dragons and Beyond, how do we do this? Okay, so first thing you guys need to figure out if you're going to do, right now we know we're doing a lot of virtual programming. So you need to decide if you're going to run an in-person or a virtual program. And as you can see, this is actually our teen area at Central Library, because we were doing some D&D programming there last year. And then this is actually from a YouTube show that was for charity, where they had parents and kids playing together. So I highly recommend it. It was great to watch. So if you know which way you're going to run your program, that's going to influence what kind of resources you need. So to get started, for those of you who have never ever run a game, played a game, and if you're trying to do in person, you want to try, I would suggest starting with a starter set. There are 4 for Dungeons and Dragons that I know of. There's the original starter set, which is on the left side of your screen. The Essentials kit, there's actually a Stranger Things starter set where the campaign is written as if the character Mike from Stranger Things wrote the campaign that you're playing. And then there's actually a Rick and Morty Dungeons and Dragons game that's based in the Rick and Morty world. And all of these kits come with a screen, a Dungeon Master screen. It comes with a set of dice for you, 4 to 5 pre-made characters, a basic rule book, as well as a basic adventure book. So it's got everything you need to run a game. And it walks you through it. It tells you in any pre-made adventure that you get, you will get any adventures. It will tell you like what the setting is, where you're going, how you know where your players are at the point when they come into the scene, and then it'll have like in a box, it'll say exactly what they see. So for instance, in front of me I have a mini encounter, and in the box it says, as you unwind during your well-deserved resting time, a strange shape appears in the sky over a low hill. At first it appears to be a hot air balloon, but the structure below is too big to be a basket. And that's how you start introducing your players into what's going on in that adventure. Now, if you're running in person and you don't want to use a starter set, what are you really going to need? These 3 books are the only 3 books you want to have if you're running in person. They cover the characters, the races, the rules, the monsters, downtime, and different things you're going to run into as a dungeon master. These are the only 3 source books I would suggest you have on hand for any of your games once you get past the starter set and you want to continue to do it. But the starter sets are a good way to see if you want to actually do it. If the kids are interested, you can get them at Target, at Amazon. They range in price between like $12.50 and $22 for the starter sets, at least as of this morning when I checked. So you want these 3 books. Check your collections. You may already have them in your library too. So you can actually use what you have in your collection until you decide this is going to be a thing we're going to do for a really long time, and I'd rather not have to return them. You also need a character sheet, which you can download for free. That's actually one of my character sheets. Dice. I suggest if you're running it with kids that you have a big set of dice. You can buy this set of dice on Amazon for maybe about $20, $30, and it's got 140 total dice in it, which is about 10 or 12 sets, I believe. And that way you can hand them out sets of polyhedral dice and then take them back at the end so that they always have dice. Because in my experience working with teens, both in the library and the game that I was running at one of the high schools here, they always forget their dice. And then of course pencils and paper, because they're going to want to write things down, because in D&D, if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. If you don't write down that you found 100 gold, you don't have 100 gold. And then there's optional materials, and these are things you've probably seen and you probably associate with when you think Dungeons and Dragons. You have, on the left, you have your battle maps, and you have blank ones you can print. You can find pre-printed ones and print them out and tape them together, which I've done large ones that way. You can make your own. You don't have to buy the fancy ones like in this picture. If you get a piece of poster board, take a ruler and grid out 1-inch squares, and then either laminated or covered in some clear contact paper, then you've got a dry erase battle map. And then you can draw on like squares for buildings and draw on your rivers and trees and things like that. Your Dungeon Master screen, that was what I mentioned, comes in the starter set. They do sell them as a little more heavy duty. And the outside has a picture of this. This is the standard one. It's got a picture of a red dragon on it. And the inside actually has a lot of information that is helpful for you if you're running your game. Everything from like encounter difficulties to how much like an L would be at the pub, or what the different skill sets that you're going to roll through and try and roll for are. For instance, I always say that the rules for D&D are more of a guide than a absolute must be, because you always find new ways to use them. The game that I run, I gave one of my players, showed up at his in-game girlfriend's house, and she opened the door, yelled at him, handed him a basket, and slammed the door in his face. And he looks down and there's a baby in the basket that somebody left on her doorstep and said, apparently this is your boyfriend's. And I go, and by the way, its diaper is smelly. And he goes, I guess I should change the diaper. And I said, well, roll a survival check. I'm going to need you to roll for diaper change. He rolled the best you could roll. So he changed that diaper like a boss. But so it's got information on that and like how, and just different things that are like basic things you need to know. And then there's a lot of free resources that you can access online. Wizards of the Coast, who makes Dungeons and Dragons, has free character sheets. They have free pre-generated characters that you can just download. I highly suggest when you first start playing, if you're running your own campaign, you're homebrewing, or even if you're running just a campaign from a book that's already set up, but you want them to have their own characters that aren't from one of the starter sets, I highly suggest you download a bunch of the characters and let them choose one of those and maybe modify it a little bit if they want, but start with those, just because it takes forever to make a character. So if you're starting off from scratch, you're going to want to have an entire session that's a couple of hours that is just a character creation session, because otherwise you won't have time to play during that session at all, because it takes time to do all of that. And so Wizards of the Coast has official pre-generated characters. The link on the right where it says pre-made characters is another one of my favorite ones. And you guys don't have to write any of this stuff down. It's all in the handout, because that's how I roll. Also with D&D puns. But so there's a ton more pre-made characters there of all races, classes, a bunch of different levels. So like if you're going to start out with an adventure that says you need level 5 characters, you can find level 5 characters in there and not have to start from scratch. There's also a link to a PDF of a player reference sheet that I've included for you guys. I'm not going to pull it up here because there's a lot of information on there and it's tiny to read on the screen, but it has everything from what the different skills are on your character sheet to the difficulties of things and some of the stuff that's on the regular on that DM screen, but also like what actions can you take in combat, so when you're playing, what can you do, what can't you do, how does that work? It's got a lot of the most useful information that your player might want in front of them. So I would suggest you print that out and give that to them. Fantasy name generator. I use it all the time. I'm terrible with names. I have a NPC character in my game that I run named Fisherman Fishman, because I had to come up with that on the spot. There's also a cartwheel maker named Carter, who runs Carter's Cartwheels. And so this is great if your kids are having trouble or your adults are having trouble figuring out names for things. It's also got things for like naming towns, naming taverns, and it has all the different ethnicities or races from the game and for multiple different games as well. So you can, if you're playing Pathfinder, you can go in and find like Pathfinder-esque names. And then also, I talked about, I think I showed you guys, I didn't mention the miniatures over here on the right on this slide, but you also think a lot of the little mini figures when you play D&D, you don't have to have those to play. Is it fun to have them? Yes, but you don't have to have them to play. Think about when you play Monopoly at home and you're missing the pieces and you use like you use your die, you use a dice, you use a penny, you use, whatever you can find to be your token, right? You can do the same thing in D&D. I have actually used little tiny plastic puppies as monsters because I forgot a monster one day. And so I attacked my people with monsters. They were really like evil creatures, but they looked like the most adorable puppies you have ever seen. So that's always fun too. So you can, and honestly, the miniatures, you can actually make a whole nother program with that and have people bring minis in and paint them. So yes, nice to have, don't necessarily need them. This token stamp website in the middle of the screen actually makes just what is in this image above here. You can drop a picture in and make a little round token. So then you can download them and you can print them out. And I'm sure you guys remember Pogs. You can glue them onto washers or whatever you want to glue them on, or cardstock or anything a little heavy to have your minis instead of having actual physical minis. For like instead of the plastic figurines. And also Google is your best friend when you're running a D&D game. I've been running my game for 2 years now, and I'm still looking things up like, I don't know what that is. What spell is that? If you Google for Dungeons and Dragons, any possible Dungeons and Dragons thing and tack 5e, which is 5th edition, onto the end, it's going to come up with a website that will answer the question about whatever question it is you have. Some other places you can find videos and tutorials and resources. I highly recommend YouTube, especially when you're beginning. Go and find, they have a lot of like real-time live action play games that people play, like Critical Role, Fantasy High, so many other different ones. Those are just some popular ones that I know of. And you can actually watch them play. Now, those are kind of high level ones. The people playing them are like voice actors and comedians and improv actors and things, but you watch them play, and one of the things you realize is there's not a right way to play and there's not a wrong way to play. Like I said earlier, the rules are kind of guidelines. So you'll see them do something and you'll be like, you can do that. And when you're the dungeon master, you are in charge of the game. So if you say it can be done, it can be done. If your player says, I want to do this crazy thing like jump off a rock, do a flip, land in the splits, and throw a hand axe, you say, okay, roll acrobatics, because that's fun. And then they roll a 1 and fail, and you get to make up how they failed. So YouTube has that. It has people make videos all the time about new resources that come out, about old resources that are out. What are the best magic items? What are the best things to give your bard if you want to create a bard in your game? What are the pros and cons of being an orc instead of an elf, kind of things. So anything you can think of to ask, there's also probably a YouTube video about it. The Dungeon Masters Guild is another resource. They are a place where you can find pre-made adventures and maps and things. You do have to pay for some of them. Some of them are free. You can find some free things on there, but you can find a lot of free adventures on there that and they'll tell you before you buy them, oh, this should take an hour to run this adventure, and it's for 5 characters with an average level of 3. So, and it'll give you all that information. And just like I was talking about on the sheet earlier, it will show you, like, it'll tell you exactly what to do during the adventure, and it'll walk you through how to run it. There's a thing called Adventurers League, which is like an official league for Dungeons and Dragons that people play in. They have a lot of Adventurers League modules on there, and those tend to run from like 1 to 4 hours depending on the module. And you can play those without being part of Adventurers League, if you just have to buy them. And they also walk you through the entire adventure. The first adventure I ever ran for somebody was for a gaming store, and he was like, I've got this module, can you run this for me? And I said, sure, I've never done it before. He's like, oh, you'll be fine. It was fine. Everything I needed to know was in there. Just read through the whole thing before you run it. And then also, one of my favorite resources on YouTube is from Critical Role. It's called Hamburger Helper, which is a ridiculous name. But they do little short videos where they talk about how to make a bard, how to quick build it, how to make all these other characters. What is this particular screenshot is from their video on what is an ability check, what are proficiencies, and what are saving throws. They even have one on what are these funny shaped dice and what am I supposed to use them for? And they put everything very clearly, and there's a whole playlist of short videos. So it's one of the most useful resources I found when I was learning about these things. And then also I want to tell you guys that RPGs are for people of all ages. So don't just think, oh, I'm going to run this for my teens. You might have adults that want to play. You might want to play with some of your school age kids, and you don't have to just play Dungeons and Dragons. You know, there's a My Little Pony Tales of Equestria RPG. There's actually a video on YouTube of people playing this one. There's a game called No Thank You Evil for the younger kids. And they can actually, if they start getting scared or start getting like a little anxious about something, they can say no thank you evil, and then you can step back and come back at this a different way. There's Bubble Gumshoe, which is supposed to be a teen detective RPG where you're trying, you know, somebody's stealing bicycles, you need to figure out who's doing this. It's very Nancy Drew. You've got Star Wars and Pathfinder, which tend to be, I think, a little more complicated than Dungeons and Dragons, but still fun. And there's even a Wendy's RPG, as in Wendy's the restaurant, where all the characters are food-based. It's called Feast of Legends. So there's all kinds of different RPGs that you can find. So if you know you try D&D and it's not for you, maybe another one is. And so this is kind of my last slide, but you guys will be able to ask me questions at the end too. So when you start, pick your game. Go ahead and you know, read and watch videos about the basics of gameplay. Because, you know, again, you want to have a loose idea of how it works. Talk to people who play the game. I highly recommend that, whether that's people that come in your library or stopping in a game store and say, hey, I work at the library and I'm thinking about running a Dungeons and Dragons program for this group. And can you give me any advice? You may come away from it with somebody to run your game for you. Because generally people who play want to play more. Find out if there's a pre-made adventure, because the pre-made ones when you're starting out and learning, I think are the best way to go. And find those online free resources and have fun and play. You'll see the picture on the right. This was actually a one-shot that I ran for my friends where we just played on a Saturday for several hours, and they had taken a potion that made all the horrible things in the world look like candy, so I attacked them with my peeps. Literally. And every time they killed one, they got to eat it. So, you know, have fun, because if you're not having fun while you're running the game, then your players probably aren't having fun. So, and I think that's the biggest thing is, you know, don't stress it too much. It's not as hard as it seems to be. Watch those videos and take a look at different ones, because different people's games are different. When I run my games, it's very goofy. The game that I play in and my other DM runs is a little more serious. So, you know, everybody's game is slightly different. And I am now going to turn, oh, we've got some people. Sorry, I did not let them in. I'm going to turn this over to Austin so he can talk about how we use different software. And I need to stop screen sharing. I hope that was helpful. Let's see. Austin, I'm going to make you host. You need to keep an eye on the waiting room, though.
Okay, I'll do my best.
Okay, all yours.
You made somebody else the host. It's not me.
Oh, shoot. Who did I make the host? I thought I did.
Alyssa Morgan.
Hey, Alyssa, can you make me the host again, please? Sorry about that. I think the screen shifted right when I did it.
That's fair.
And just a heads up, if you're someone who is just let into the training, oh, how do you do that? So Alyssa, if you go to the participants view and hover over Kirsten's name, or actually Austin's name, sorry, I guess we're changing it to Austin. You should have the opportunity to make him the host. There we go.
Hey, there we go.
Real quick, Austin. So if you just joined us, apologies that you were just let in, waiting room issues. But we are recording this and I'll be sending out the recording to everyone. So you'll be able to catch up.
Yep, and we've got a handout too. So if you feel like you missed out on anything, you can look at the handout. All right, let me get my screen shared here. I've got a PowerPoint slide for us. All right, thanks everybody for coming out. My name is Austin. I just a little bit about me and my D&D experience. Out of the three of us, Chris, Kirsten, myself, I probably have the least amount of D&D experience. I've only been playing for like a year and a half or so. But if this is the sort of thing you're interested in and you feel like maybe you're diving into the deep end, I started off by just DMing an adventure with a group of friends, and I was super nervous about it. But we've ended up having a really good time. Initially, like I just listened to some D&D podcasts, and I got really interested in playing. D&D always kind of seemed like something that was like a bridge too far in nerddom for me. But once I started listening to podcasts, it was like, oh, like this is actually super cool and something I want to do. So if you're nervous about it, if you feel like it might be impossible, don't. It's really not that hard at all. And it's very rewarding. I think it's a very rewarding experience. So you're here, you're interested, but you need to get down to brass tacks. What do I need to do to actually run a game? I've got people that are interested. They're going to be showing up in a couple of weeks or a month or something. What do I need to have ready to go? I've got an adventure written, but I need the technical side of it. So I'm going to talk to you today about some websites that are pretty important. These are the ones that we use for our D&D sesh that we run with teens at Central Library every other Tuesday. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what each of these are, how they work, and how we use them, and why they're important to us. So if you're familiar with any of them, you can just sit back and relax. And then if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll try to get to them at the end. But all these are pretty easy to use. Once you get into it, you might have to spend some time with them beforehand, kind of get around, poke around, click around, make sure you know how everything works. But nothing's really too extreme or too crazy. So the first one we're going to talk about is Roll20. If I can go to the next slide. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Roll20. So these are all online as well. So we're assuming you're running an online program right now because of COVID. When you play D&D, you usually are at a table with people, and you can roll dice, and you can see a map, and you can see your characters if you have them, whatever those look like. Roll20 is going to take that entire experience and put it into a website for you. You can join it virtually and pretend like you're sitting at a tabletop pretty much around your computer screen, and you've got other players sitting there with you. So you've got a tabletop that you can put a map on, you can put characters onto it, and then Roll20 does some stuff that's really handy. When you play D&D, a lot of it is math, which is really fun. You get to do some formulas. How much damage am I going to do to this person? Well, you've got to do some math to figure that out. But the advantage of something like Roll20 is it takes that and it does all the math for you. All you have to do is click a button, and you no longer have to worry about the math, which is great. I started off playing in person with my group of friends, and then when we finally switched over to Roll20 because of COVID, so much easier. All I have to do is click a button now. So it's pretty good for that. Roll20 has voice chat, text chat, video chat built into it. So it's kind of a one-stop shop if you want it to be. I don't recommend their voice chat, video chat. It's not very good. I would recommend another service, which we'll talk about here because we use another one. But other than that, I would say it's nearly essential to running an online game. If you are thinking about doing a D&D program, get familiar with Roll20 because it's good. Now, it has a free version and a paid version. You can just go and set up an account and make a game and get going. You do not need to pay a cent. Now, if you're going to upload things like maps or character tokens or stuff like that, you have a very small storage limit. I believe it's 3 gigabytes for the free version. Any sort of high quality images or anything like that, you're going to start running out of space pretty quickly, but you can make it work. I don't personally have a paid version. I make a free version work. But at the library, we have a paid version. With the paid version, you're going to get more storage. You're going to get some fully custom character sheets. Roll20 has a nice feature where when you load up a game, you can ask it to use a character sheet. So you can make a D&D character if you want. But if you're playing another role-playing game, it has a variety of character sheets. It might not necessarily be from every role-playing game because there's a lot out there. but you might be able to do a different one and just have character sheets in there that you can use. And then you get things like dynamic lighting. So when people like move their tokens around on the map, the lighting shifts, which is pretty cool. Kind of a little bit more like video game-like almost. Definitely not necessary, but gives you that sense of immersion a little bit. And then a big one too is sharing character sheets across multiple games. So you can set up multiple games that you might be playing. So at the library for us, we have 2 tables essentially. 2 games that could be going on simultaneously. Chris and I made a whole bunch of characters for them. We shared them across the games so that, let's say a kid comes to one table one week and then he is going to be at the other table the next week. He can have the same character of both of them. Not a huge deal if you don't have a big party or anything like that, or if you don't have multiple games going on. But it is a nice feature. What else do I want to say about Roll20? If you're DMing, if you're running the game yourself, it gives you a lot of nice features. You have different like layers that you can put stuff on, so you can have secret things on there that the party can't see that you want to reveal to them. Like creatures and characters and parts of your map and stuff like that. And then you have a bunch of different pages that you can move people around, so you can really like kind of curate a good D&D experience for them. And like I said before, you can have character sheets, which is really nice in person. That's just a piece of paper you can forget. But if you're playing on Roll20, it's just there all the time, ready for you. You can open it up. You can look at, if you're a DM, you can look at everybody's character sheets, which is nice to make sure that they're doing stuff right. And then because you're playing online and on Roll22, you see everybody's rolls that they're making. If you're playing with a group of kids and they're rolling dice personally, maybe they want to lie about it. I don't know. Both Roll20, all the rolls are right there. You see what everybody's rolling, so they can't cheat at all. Highly recommend, near essential, I would say, if you're going to be playing an online version of D&D. So we use Roll20 a lot every time we play at the library. D&D Beyond is what I'm going to talk about next. We don't use D&D Beyond a whole lot. What D&D Beyond is if we look at the books that Kirsten talked about earlier, the Player's Handbook, the Monster Manual, the DM's Guide, D&D Beyond is a good resource to get digital copies of those. And then also you can use it to make characters and look up abilities and look up spells and look up rules all right there. If you're going to be playing a game without Roll20, highly recommend D&D Beyond. Roll20 has a lot of that in there as well, which I did forget to mention. It has like spells and what they do. Beyond just making a roll to do damage, you can also look up to see what a spell does when you cast it. A lot of that is right there for you, and it's very simple, very easy. D&D Beyond also does that. It looks a little bit prettier than Roll20 does, and it's not it's not any tabletop, it's not any rolling dice, it's just a resource, an information resource for you. So like in my personal game, when we played in person, I had a player who had an iPad with him, and he had his character up on D&D Beyond. So he had his character sheet right there. He never had to remember to bring a piece of paper. If he needed to do something, it told him how to do it, what he had to roll, what the math was on it. So instead of having maybe a big book with you, if you're more into like an e-reader sort of thing, maybe you already have an iPad or a tablet that you use to do a lot of reading, D&D Beyond might be a nice thing for you. With the free version, you can make like 7 characters, and then you have to pay to buy the books. Even if you have a paid subscription, I believe you still have to pay to buy the books. It's not like they come with it, but you can do a monthly subscription. That will, I know you can then make unlimited characters, and then I believe you have to have a paid account for both. I can't remember exactly, but if you have a paid account with Roll20, you can import characters from D&D Beyond into Roll20, and I don't know if you can go the other way as well, but you might be able to. But if you're running in person or you're running in online without Roll20, I think D&D Beyond is a very good resource for you. Highly recommend. Also, it's great if you just want to get into like making characters up. Check out D&D Beyond, make some characters. It's very fun. And there's a little bit more visual to it than Roll20. All right, up next is Zoom. We don't use Zoom personally for our D&D campaign, but you totally can. It's good for talking to people. You've got some voice chat, you've got some text chat, you've got video. It will definitely fit a lot of needs, and it's easy to use, which is nice. Instead, we use Discord. Discord's a little bit more complex, but if you're tech savvy and you're willing to take a little bit of a leap and a little bit of learning, highly recommend Discord. So Discord is free to use, and it's server based. So you can make a server in Discord and then set it up however you want. It's comprised mostly of text channels and voice channels. You can use video with your voice channel as well, but it kind of acts as a message board as well as text chat and then video and voice chat. So it's nice. The biggest thing that we use it for is because we don't necessarily have the same people coming week to week. Maybe we've got somebody comes 1 week and then they come like, a few sessions later. We keep a running recap of our sessions in Discord. So kids can log on and they can be like, all right, I haven't been here for a while. What happened? And they can see right there, like, okay, here's the recap channel. I can read through what's happened in the last couple sessions that I missed. Pretty handy. It also provides a nice place to do text chat. There's text chat in Roll20, but oftentimes it's the same place that you're doing your rolls for whatever's happening in the game. So maybe you don't want to muddy it up with text chat and all the rolls that you're doing. So it's nice to have another place where people can go and do that. Again, you can do a lot of the same stuff with Zoom, but if you're planning on running a long campaign or doing a program for a while online, Discord's really nice because you've got a place where everything is kept, if you want to do a recap or anything like that. And a good advantage of running two separate programs like Discord and Roll20 is if one service goes down, everybody's still logged into another one. We do some light moderating. I have a bot that I run in our Discord that will suspend people or kick them out if they use bad language. So if somebody accidentally gets kicked out because I put the wrong word into the bot and it thinks that, some innocuous word that's completely not bad is bad and it kicks somebody out, like, oh, they're still in Roll20 and I can tell them how to get back in and everything will be fine. So it's kind of just a safety net if you need one to make sure if anything happens to anybody, they're still, hopefully we're still logged into another thing. Discord's great. All these things are free to use. Discord, I believe, has paid features, but I have no idea what they are because I've never had to use them. So if that speaks to how good it is without paying for it at all, it's very good. I believe that's all I have to talk about. Hopefully all that made sense. If you have questions about anything, what we use or why we use it or how it's used, please feel free to ask. If you're interested in anyone, please poke around them. They're all great resources, all great websites to use. Discord also has a program that you can download or an app on your phone. I don't know if Roll20 has an app. I have no idea. D&D definitely has D&D Beyond definitely has an app. Kirsten says yes, Roll20 has an app. But all of them are web-based as well. You don't need to download anything. You just hop onto your browser, go check them out. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris after Zoom starts working. Okay. And he's going to tell you about our D&D game and what we do with it.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Chris. I do the same gig at Central Library as Austin. I started playing D&D a little bit in college. It was a different version. So I've kind of followed along some of these most recent versions, and we're on the 5th. I feel like we've given you a ton of information so far. So what I hope to do is kind of show you the example, paint a picture, fill in some of the gaps here. And unfortunately, I don't have a PowerPoint for you. I'm just going to be sharing my screen and showing you what it looks like online when we're playing the game. So hopefully that will be interesting to you as well. When Kirsten began, she said, one of the first things you got to decide is if you're going to be in person or online. Right now, we had to go online. Now that we've run a few sessions, this program has been my first time running the game. Well, I played a little bit in college and a little bit with some of my friends before. I'd never run a game myself. And now that we're running it, I'm looking forward to trying this in person. I think it's going to be fantastic in person. But we're still having a good time with it online, and there's some cool things that you can do with it too. But we were like, right now, out of necessity, we're going to run it virtual. And I still, one of the things that I did when I was playing is I got to play in the play test for this edition. And what Wizards of the Coast did is they worked with local game stores and they ran 1 hour 1 hour sessions for play testing. And so I thought this game, which typically you would sit at a table and play for 2 or 3 hours at a time, you can have like a quick short adventure. So that's kind of what we were aiming for. I think when we come back to in person, 1 hour is totally viable. I think for online, give yourself a cushion. I think we're going to bump ours up to 1.5 hours just because each time we've had our kids join in, we usually have a new player or someone's having technical difficulties, and we'll burn 15 to 25 minutes just getting everybody to the table. So we're aiming for like this shorter, condensed D&D experience online. And so the only other note I had down, like someone mentioned, like doing the math can be a benefit of Dungeons and Dragons. Absolutely. And one of the things I'll show you when we're in Roll20 is even though it'll do the math for you, if you hover over the numbers, it'll show you the equation. It'll show you the math that happened. And very much in person, that can be a huge benefit of the game. You're in addition to the social emotional stuff that you're hitting, working together with teamwork, you're practicing vocabulary, you're practicing reading, you're doing your math. So all those good things are happening. All right. So the next thing that happens with D&D is there's just so much of it. Like this isn't an actual D&D book, this is a different game, but the books are huge. You're not supposed to read them cover to cover. And I'm a big believer, no matter what you're doing, whether it's learning Photoshop or podcasting, whatever you're doing, like play with it and learn as you go. Don't try and get everything all up front necessarily. You're always aiming for, you want people who are trying out your experience to have fun enough to come back and want to try it again. So what I've tried to do is I've tried to set it up like, if you're playing with your friends, hopefully you've done a little homework and you're setting up for session 0, you're making your characters all together, you're going to talk about rules a little bit, figuring out what the heck you're doing. And then the next time you get together, you're playing. And we're trying to streamline that so that kids can get in, pick a character, we're going to tell them a little bit of the backstory, and we're just going to start playing, and we're going to teach them as they go. So with that in mind, one of the things you can do if you're making a classic campaign, if you buy one ahead of time, or if you're making your own, oftentimes you start with this really cool world map, and you're starting in a city. So you're thinking about what are the places in the city, who lives here, what's going on in the world right now. And so there's so much that you can create. I'm playing a game with a guy, he was so into this, like he's an IT person by day. And so for a creative outlet, like this is his hobby. And he created like a whole calendar for this world that he made up, and he made a website. And so you can go really in depth. As someone running a lot of programs at the library, I'm like, I don't have a ton of time to dedicate to doing this every week. So what are some options? And when we were researching online by going through YouTube, looking for things, Austin and I found something called a West Marches style game. So instead of creating an entire world, what we did is we are starting out in a small camp in the middle of a vast wilderness. And that's all there is. We don't know what's out there. It's so dangerous, in fact, that at the end of before the end of the day, you want your characters to come back to base. And so what that enables us to do is we can make a couple points of interest, a couple options that they can go explore each time we play. They pick one, we go have our encounter. And over time, as we play, we can work with the players and we can create the world as we go. It's called a West Marches style. Yeah. So when I discovered that, I thought, hey, that might work really well for us, which is not to dissuade you if you want to make a whole world and knock yourself out. But that's what we're trying, and I'll show you what that looks like here. And like Austin said, we decided we're going to try and do 2 virtual tables. Yeah, well, it sounds like Skyrim. Actually, when we introduced this to the teens, and I started describing what it was, they said, oh, like Minecraft. And I was like, yeah, of course, just like Minecraft. That's what I was thinking, yeah. And that ended up working well too, because if you're in a traditional D&D world, you got to think about, well, if they've got this gold, you need to have a store for them to go spend their gold at. If you're in the middle of a wilderness, you may or may not have things to buy with gold. So what do you do for treasure? So I'll talk about our solution to that here in a little bit. And I just kind of went with that Minecraft idea of crafting things. Got to keep an eye on my time, make sure I have time to show you all this stuff. So let's get into Roll20. I'm going to show you what this looks like. I'm going to share my screen. I want to share Roll20. Boom. Give that a second to load. Okay. So our department at the Central Library is where the learning curve. This is our list of games on our learning curve Roll20 account. And these are the two tables. When our kids, when we send out the link to play, we meet up in Discord and we can talk to them, we can chat with them with the text, and we can split them into the 2 voice channels. If we've got enough players that we need 2 tables, then we can assign them to the direwolf table or the wormling table. And that can change from week to week. That's fine. If we have like only 6 or 7 players, we might try and keep them all at the same table anyway. But this gives us our option. This is nice with that plus account that we have. We can set up one of the tables and then just copy the whole table. We just relabel it to direwolf. So we can set up once and have extra seats for players. So I'm going to show you. I'm going to launch into this. What it looks like when we start our game in Roll20. Let's see. I want to make sure I cover all my bullet points. Right. So the way I have this set up, like there can be some overload when you're trying this whole endeavor, because D&D can be a complicated game, and each system that you add makes the experience a little bit trickier. So it's like, now we've got kids on Discord on the voice chat that's minimized. They're pulling up Roll20. There's all sorts of tools and stuff you can do with this. So my task was to figure out how do we introduce this in a way that we can just get to playing and not stress out about what's happening. So when our players arrive, this is the first screen I have that they see. It's like, welcome to Roll20. What I do is I log into Roll20 first. I get this player link that's off to the side, and I can paste that into the text chat in Discord and share that. If you're not going to use Discord, if you're going to send out an email, you could. If you just want to try to roll everything in Roll20, this is where you would get your game link for the day. You can send that to your players so they can join in. But hopefully they'll see that I've taken a screenshot here. The first thing I want to do is click on the journal, because a big part of regular D&D session 0, making your character, that's the whole game into itself. And the more you play, the more ideas you get, the more characters you want to make. Especially for new players who've never played before, starting with something pre-made is a great way to teach the game. So I'll have them click over here, and let's see here. And then these are the characters that Austin and I found are created ahead of time. So I'll say, welcome to the game. Your first task is click on one of these, take a look and find a character who sounds interesting to you. So when they click on that, they're just going to see a little bit of background about where this person's coming from, what's their personality like, what are they good at, what are their flaws. And at this point, it's just purely like, find someone who you think sounds entertaining and let us know who you'd like to be. So if someone decides they want to be this bard, I'll say great. Each character has a character sheet here. Before we get there, since these are pre-made, you can go in, you can assign these character sheets to each player. I'm not going to go into the fine details about how to do all the things like that. Just be aware that you can do it, because especially if you don't use Roll20, if you find another service, like the things you can do are going to be similar. The exact way you do it's going to be different. Roll20 has a lot of built-in tutorials for the nitty-gritty details, and there's always lots of resources online just by Googling. Just like if you put 5e after anything that you search for, it's going to pull up something D&D related for you. If you do Roll20 and the question, there's going to be tons of information and wikis out there for you. We purposely gave the characters like gender neutral names, because then the next thing we do, once they've picked out their character and we assign it to them so they have control of that character sheet, is we let them pick a token. This is like in so many video games where you're designing your character. What do you want your person to look like? And this is also a chance for me to teach them a new tool. I try and teach things like one idea at a time. So you have like a paintbrush tool here. And I say, try using that paintbrush and circle or select your character that you want to use today. So I'll have them do something to let me know what character they want. And I'll attach that to the character sheet. Now they've got a player token and they've earned one of the first tools of the game. And then we'll also, like on the character sheet, let them pick what pronouns, what gender they want their character to be for the day. And once all our characters are assigned, I bring them to our first stop here. This is a piece of artwork that I found online. This one's from an artist who runs a website. I think it's called like 2 Minute Tabletop. But it was a pay what you want. You could download this for free from this artist, or I gave him some a few dollars for the artwork. But I just thought it would be nice to have a picture to show an idea of where we're starting from. And this also gives me a chance to teach a new tool, the zoom feature. You can zoom out so you can see more of what you're looking at. So this is the point where I will just give them the basic storyline. I have an intro that I've written. I keep it in a Word document. I can pull it up and tell them what's going on. And for this West Marches idea, the character backgrounds from the pre-made character sheets all talked about all these things that they've done. How, like, you know, someone was a thief, someone was an adventurer, someone was in the military, you know, so someone has a soldier background. And I was trying to think about, well, if this world is all this is, if this is what you have, how do they have all those backgrounds? Where are these coming from? So I just came up with the idea that, hey, you all teleported here from the big city, and the teleporter is now broken and you're stuck. So this is the world that you're in now. And it could be as simple as that. And what I have here, in addition to, I labeled these buildings, you can label things. There's in addition to Paintbrush, you can add text notes on different layers. Austin mentioned layers. So there's an object layer, there's a map layer, and the player layer. So if you think of it as layers of a sandwich, your top one is your map, or I guess the bottom one would be the map. That's where you put your pictures, and then the middle one, the cheese, that's the main part that you want. That's where the players are going to be moving their tokens around, where the monsters are going to be moving around. But the whole thing is like that way you can click and drag stuff without messing up your map. And then on top, the GM overlay, that's stuff that I can see running the game, but other people can't see. So my players, part of the map, they can see the names of these places on the map. But then I also have, I'll zoom in a little bit here. I wrote down the names of some of the characters who work here, the NPCs, or the non-player characters. These are people that they may discover. If the players say, when I say, you're leaving the common house, where do you want to go? If they say, we want to go to the guild house, or we want to go to the smithy, I've made notes to myself using the text, who's there right now that they might talk to. And over to the side, this is where I keep track of all the things that I put in. So like if they go to the smithy and they talk to Sarama, I can pull this up, and I've got a quick picture, a little bit of information that I can pull up, and it's ready to go. You can, if I switch to my GM layer here, the things that you add, you can move around. So like if this character is in a new spot, the next time they're there, you know, you can keep track of it that way. So there's lots of little tools that you can try, little tricks you can do there. Eventually, I want them to leave this place and go on their first encounter. So this is that. Before I go to the first encounter, I want to tell you about this cool thing over here. This was an idea that one of my DMs had, and called an X card. So kind of like a no thank you evil. If you're getting to a point where the story is a little too intense or it's uncomfortable for some reason, if you're triggering a bad memory, then in that game you say no thank you evil. And in this game, we've just added an X card. So you can, and there are tools here. There are things built into Roll20 like decks of playing cards, virtual playing cards. If you turn that on, you can like deal out playing cards, and someone will get 10 of diamonds, ace of spades, whatever. You can incorporate that into your game that you're playing, your storytelling, however you want. I just made a custom deck that has one card in it and it has an X on it. And when our players are sitting at the table, virtual table here, I deal out an X card to everybody and explain, if this is a powerful storytelling medium. We're aiming for a PG-13 experience for our teenagers, and we're always going to be respectful to each other. But if for whatever reason, if like the storyline is getting close to something that you have going on and it's upsetting you, you're not having fun with it, you don't have to explain it to us. Just drag your X card up and play that on the table. So if I wanted to do that, I can do that. And that lets us know, hey, we're going to take a break for a couple minutes. We'll go back and we'll try playing this a little differently. So that's just a way to make sure everyone's, having a safe and comfortable experience. Because if you think about it, just like a great book or a great movie, like these storytelling meetings that we have, they can be powerful stuff. It's a game, but it's also storytelling. So I think it's a good safety valve to have built into your game. So that's one that I added in. That's one way we implemented it in Roll20 here. So this landing screen is where I kind of explain to our players for the first time. It's like, all right, we assigned you a character, you picked your player token, here's the situation, and now we're ready to go do something. So depending on how this goes, telling the story, the storytelling part is a big part of the game. That might be your first session if you're going for an hour session like we are. When I play tested this with some of my friends who are my age, they had a great time talking about a food fight they had at breakfast in the common house. They didn't even hit the trail by the end of the session. The teens, they were like, let's go do something. We want to kill some monsters. So we didn't spend a lot of time in the town. They didn't talk to anybody. They just went out and we had our first encounter. So I think like each week we usually have one encounter. So this screen here is more of an example of what you would, if you had a dry erase mat, one of those battle mats or grid paper, and for in person, you can see you've got the grids here. And I have on my GM layer, they're kind of faded out. These are the lizards that they're waiting to surprise the adventurers. If I switch the layer, this is going to pop up under the layer that the players are on, and now I can move them around. And each of these monsters will have their own character sheets for attacks and defense and those sorts of things. Let me get one of my characters here. Drop them onto the map. All right. So this is where each player will be able to control their own token, move it around, and I would just say, you see a lizard on a rock. If they approach the lizard and the lizard gets mad, then we start initiative. And the rules on the character sheets come into play here. I'm going to pull up one of these now. So for Avalon, movement on a grid when you're in combat looks at your speed here. Like I said, this is a ton of information to look at and digest right away. So one of the nice things is if you're doing your homework and you play this a little bit and you know what you're looking for ahead of time, I don't explain all this character sheet stuff to the kids right away, but when they're in combat, I say, all right, click this thing, look at your character sheet, click this thing. And then they learn as we go. Because it's like, all right, so in the middle of your character sheet, you have some attacks, like this person has a rapier and a crossbow. I'll say, click on this to see what happens. So they click on it. We'll go back to the chat and we'll see, oh, they rolled a 12. So if you hover over it, this is what I was talking about earlier. If you hover over it, it'll show you the math that it did. It'll show you that it rolled a 20-sided die, added the dexterity modifier and your proficiency bonus, 7 + 3 + 2 gave you your 12. So I'll just say that means you rolled to attack the creature. If you hit, you click on that. It tells you some damage. If you hover it over, it'll tell you how it came up to that number. But they've just learned that, oh, this is a thing that my character can do. And I try and give them more choices each time we go. So I'm just introducing this stuff in bits and pieces. Well, let's see, how am I doing on time? Oh, we are almost at the end of time. Yeah. What are the key things I need to tell you? We've talked about the outpost, NPCs for each area, Los, first battle. All right.
We had a good question. Is when a kid plays the X card, is it anonymous?
That's a good question. Let me just try. See.
We haven't had it happen yet, so.
I was gonna say.
Everybody, can I butt in for one quick second? This is Beth. I just want to make sure, in case we have anyone who really needs to leave, it is 3 o'clock. I have posted both a Word document that is your TLEU certificate in the chat. I'm going to post it one more time here for you, just in case anyone mentioned that or missed that. And then I'm also posting, if you can't access that Word document for whatever reason, I'm also posting a link to a LEU request form. So you'll fill out this form and I will make sure that I get an LU certificate to you. Okay. I'm also going to be, as they're answering questions, I'm going to post the resource handout. I will be sending the recording, the resource handout, and anything else we come up with out to everyone who registered. I will not be sending the LEU certificate out to just everyone though. So you will need to make sure you can either download it or fill out that form, or at the very least, email me. Put my email in there as well. Oh, thank you, Kirsten, for posting those other two things. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, thanks.
Yeah. So the X card, I don't believe, like when it hits the table, it doesn't say like so-and-so threw an X card, but if you look, your players are going to be listed across the bottom and one person will suddenly not have an X card anymore. So it's not totally anonymous. Last thing I was going to show you real quick, I know I'm past time here, is like this one looks like a regular map. That's one that I found online. I have another spot. If they had chosen to go another spot, I also experimented with making a map that I just drew in Roll20. So if you've used Microsoft Paint or anything like that, you can draw boxes. There are assets that are built in here, like all those player tokens I found, all the artwork I found. If you go to the library here, the assets, there's a bunch of free stuff. So this is where you can get little player tokens. You can get the furniture. You just do a quick search for what you're looking for, and you can drag and drop things onto your map. So I drew a gray square. And then I went over here to my assets and I found a couple goblins. I found some tables, a staircase, dropped it in. And there's a benefit to keeping things small and simple. If your party can surprise you and split up and go and do two different things at once that you weren't planning on doing all at once, they will figure out a way to do it. So I'm learning as I go. Like I said, this is my first time doing it too. So I'm gonna stop sharing this real quick. I know we slammed you with a ton of stuff. Hopefully some of that was helpful. And if you have questions for us.
Chris, somebody asked, they said, I heard every 2 weeks. How long do you play for and how do you fit that into your work schedule? Because they're considering 2 hours and usually takes about twice that for their non-library session. So what do you do to keep the time limited?
So I'll usually spend, depends on if you're how much time you need. Will depend too on if you're using a pre-made thing or if you're creating your own. Even with the pre-made things, like some of the starting points I had, some of the maps I'm using are things that I found in a book, so I scan them in and put them in. Yeah, I'd say just like doing homework for a class that you're taking at school. It takes twice as long to prep for it. It just depends. I'm not a good person to answer this question because I'm terrible with my sense of time. I'll put it together, I'll get it uploaded, and that's one of the reasons we want to be able to duplicate it so I'm not duplicating the effort. If you have just one table, then that won't be an issue. I will say this West Marches style, I'll share this real quick. I'll share this. This is a time-saving thing I can share. Share my screen again, go back into Roll20. If you're with a traditional campaign, I know you can sink a ton of time into what you're doing. If you're writing the story, if you're writing character backstories, and there's always a risk. Am I sharing my screen? Can everybody see this again?
No.
No. That's what I want. Share. There it goes. If you show them a map of a huge fancy world, you have a lot of stuff to prepare. What I show them when they're in that village of Fog's Edge right off the bat, I say you have two choices that you can visit. You can go to the old dig site or you can go to what might be a tower. So now instead of a whole world to prepare for a week, I have two possible spots to prepare for a week. Also, instead of like preparing a 3-hour session with your friends, a typical session might have 3 encounters. And for a 1-hour thing, it's usually going to be 1. So on a week where I have more time, if I can prepare 2 or 3 encounters that week, I'm set for 2 or 3 play sessions probably. The other thing that we've had is we've had kids show up play for a few sessions, drop out, and then we have a new batch of kids. So now I can go back and I can reuse my previous sessions again. But we're getting to the point where I've used up some of what I prepared. So if it's a busy week and it's like I have enough time, I can spend a couple hours and put together one more encounter idea and try and keep. I want to always give them an option of 2 things in this world. It's like you can like so far we've gone to the dig site. So I have a tower I haven't used yet. I have a couple encounters ready to go there. But as soon as someone picks the tower, I'm gonna make sure that I've worked ahead and made a new location so that there's always 2 choices. So that's one of the reasons we tried this West Marches instead of a classic. If you're going classic and you're making a whole world, then that might take a lot more time.
Can you also explain, Chris? So if you have 5 players and the 5th player misses the next game, and what do you do?
Okay, so if someone misses a game, we'll update our Discord server so that they can read what happened. But what's cool about us having the pre-made characters, another benefit of that is like week to week, people can try a different character if they want. We think about it like we're at a library. If they want to check out a different character and try it out, they can do that. We also are, one of the ways when you're playing D&D is the characters can level up with experience points, or we're doing a milestone. So every 3 sessions, let's say, you can pick what you want. You can level up your characters. And so with the pre-made characters, we can keep them even. And we kind of bypass the issue of if someone missed a week, they're going to be behind the others. This is one of the ways that we're getting around that is like when we go to the next adventure, at some point we'll make all the characters level 2, and the kids who show up that week can grab that level 2 character and dive back in. Now we have a person who's like, I want to make my own character. I'm really into that. So I'm just going to ask them to give me their character ahead of time, and I'll put it into the system so it'll match up what everyone else is going with. And it'd be super cool, whether you're doing in person or online, to get to the point. If you have someone who wants to try running the game, I mean, definitely we've got to be there to keep, the teens are gonna not play this with the same level of social emotional level that the adults can. So for example, like we right off the bat, we had a teenager who went into the game. It's like, well, I'm a thief background. I want to try and steal something from one of the other players. And it's like, well, this isn't that kind of game. How do you think that would make them feel? That's not a nice thing to do. We're supposed to be working as a team to go do things. So, and we put so much thought into, like, we're worried about X cards. We're worried about this, this like great experience. And a teen running a game might not have the same level of ability to do that. But if we're there to help, guide the experience, we can still contribute that part. But I never want to, like, one of the great things about the game is not saying no. Like in a video game, you try and cut down a tree, it doesn't cut down, not part of the game. In this game, if someone say, I want to try it, yes, let's see how we can figure that out. So anyway, any other questions?
So if anybody has any questions and you want to unmute yourself and ask, this is the time to do it.
We did have one other question. Kim had asked, have you ever created the world or town with your teens, or do you do all of that world building in advance? I think you guys kind of addressed that, but do you want to talk about it a little more?
Yeah, so I always want to do starting points. So the things I showed you were things I kind of made ahead of time, but what's fun to do is, like, when they get to the tower, I can say, like, there's some worn out ancient writing. What could it say? Maybe they have to roll a die to see if they can try and read it. And if they succeed, they'll be like, what does it say? And all of a sudden they're going to be telling me the name of that tower, and that becomes part of the world. Especially, and like West Marches again lends itself. Well, this is why we picked it, because it's like, if they have ideas for things that they want to do, like we can throw out all sorts of hooks and rumors. Like maybe there's dungeons out there. Maybe there's like caves out there. Maybe you can go underwater somewhere. If there's something that's interesting, they can tell us they're interested in that. It becomes part of the world. We can make that happen, and then they can help us name things or tell us about it. You can create those opportunities for sure. And that collaboration adds just another layer of quality to what you're doing.
Yeah, your players will always add things to your game that you aren't expecting. It may be something from their backstory where they say, oh yeah, I was a town over 2 months ago and this thing happened over there. And so now you have to write down that there's a town, X number of miles north of here that this happened in, so you remember for later.
Some of the best advice I've ever seen is draw maps but leave blank spaces. And that's like, we try and leave a lot of blank for this just because we want to keep it minimal, but allow the kids to grow outwards with it.
So I could tell in the chat that we have quite a few people here who do have some experience with D&D or RPGs, but I'm sure a lot of you don't have very much experience with them. So if there was anything that just kind of went over your head or you would like a little more information about, especially when it comes to getting started, let us know if you have those questions too. You can put it in the chat or on mute.
This is, how did you begin building a group to play? Did you market to a specific age group? So for our library, the program is marketed towards teens. So it was posted on our events calendar. They posted it on our Facebook page, and it's built up slowly. I think the first game we had 2 kids, and now we have 6 or 7, and some of them missed. I love when they say, I'm sorry I couldn't make it, I had homework. But we're like, that's fine. The group that I help with through the library out at the high school already has just an after school gaming program they run every Friday when they're in person, which they are not right now. So when they are in person, before the pandemic, I would go out every other Friday and run Dungeons and Dragons for them.
Yeah, I would say for building the group, because of how complicated the online version is, where we're using 2 or 3 software packages to make it happen. Like this game, D&D would work great with younger kids. I've had some good experiences playing with younger kids, but I think in person is gonna be better for that. Just because a simpler game is gonna be better and not trying to juggle all the tech that we do. So it just became like a good team program for us to start with. And one of the benefits, like while there are other systems, like D&D is kind of like it's a known thing and it's kind of hot right now. It's been featured on television shows. People have heard of it, and so it was one of those things. Like if you offer a Minecraft program, kids are interested in it. So when we offer Dungeons and Dragons, we had interest right away because it's one that people are familiar with. So even though it's not the simplest system, it's probably the most famous, and that's got people curious about it. So our audience came to us when we tried to offer something that we knew was of interest already.
Mm-hmm. And that handout that I put in the chat has a link to the Wizards of the Coast site. You can actually download the full set of the basic rules if you want to look at them before you decide to go buy a starter set or that you want to go buy books and things. You can look through it and just kind of get a feel for what different aspects of the game involve. Okay.
Did anyone else have a question? I saw Kate was unmuted. No.
No, there's a question about what happens if only a couple people show up. And that was definitely, I mean, for our first couple of sessions, we had, nobody show up. So we didn't really do too much. But yeah, when we have a couple people show up, a lot of times because Chris is DMing, Kirsten and I will play too. We'll just, play as characters.
We have a rule in our library that at any program, be it in person or virtual, you have to have at least 2 staff members. So with possibly 2 tables running for the game, we have 4 staff members that log in. So if we have 2 kids show up, then the other 3 staff members will choose a character and play to flesh out the group so that they can still have a full game.
It's definitely an advantage of having, a lot of staff members that can be available at that time. Maybe not
but you can't
possible for everybody.
One person. I've seen some one-on-one shots videos where they're playing D&D with just the dungeon master and 1 player.
And it's another thing that's fun to incorporate into Dungeons and Dragons is it's not necessarily all combat stuff. You can definitely work in riddles and puzzles and all sorts of things like that. So if you have a game where you're running it for a single player for whatever reason, like an ideal size is like at least 3 players. But if you got 1 character in the world, in any sort of combats, you're going to risk that they're going to get wiped out no matter what it is. Like make it if you have some like a great book that of classic riddles. It's an older book. I think it's called like The Lady and the Tiger. Logic puzzles, anything like that. Just pull out something and have a puzzle encounter that week. Something less lethal.
Mhm.
Yeah, like an escape room. That'd be a great idea to work that into a session.
We didn't do a session 0 in the game that Kristen runs, but in the first session where they pick their players, they pick their character and their tokens, and he kind of, instead of going over all the sheet and how the game works at the beginning, he does it as you encounter things, so it's not overwhelming, which has worked really good as far as I can tell.
Awesome.